Type 71 is a Tier 10 Japanese tech tree heavy tank. It's going to be the next line introduced into the game, and obviously when lines are introduced, it's not just one Tier 10. You need to grind up to it. In the case of the Japanese heavies, at least in Wargaming's video, the line starts at Tier 5 and it goes all the way up to Tier 10. Now I've shown videos and pictures of the Tier 7, the Tier 8, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the Type 68, the Tier 9, that you're going to have to grind through to get to the Type 71. Now looks wise, it actually looks very, very modern, especially when you compare it to the Tier 8, which looks like a big old box. Yeah, the Tier 8's not very appealing. It's not bad looking, it's just not great. I do think that the Tier 9 actually looks very nice, very modernized, and that's going to be great because when you're actually using this tank on the battlefield, I think its armor is going to be way more effective than the Tier 8. Now, when I was able to actually take a look at the armor in a training room, what I can tell you is that the upper plate is amazing. You're going to be getting bounces all over that upper plate. You can see just how steep it is. So if you're using the 10 degrees gun depression this vehicle currently has in its testing forms, then yeah, its upper plate's going to be amazing. However, the turret is not amazing. It's about, I would say, 350 millimeters thick. What can we compare that turret's effectiveness to? Well, an Emil 2 is about the same thickness, 350, 340 millimeters. So looking at this vehicle in a training room, the armor on the turret is about the same as an Emil 2. Now, a lot of people like to say the Emil 2 doesn't have great turret armor, but honestly, it's not bad. If you're using it hull down, any Tier 8 heavy tanks and most Tier 9 heavies, unless they're vehicles like the M103 that have ridiculous heat pen, are going to struggle to cut through the turret. So I don't think that the Type 68 turret is going to be necessarily weak, but it's also not going to be so strong that you can trust it in Tier 10 matches, especially when you're using it hull down. You will be penetrated by premium ammunition, but I can say that the hull armor overall is going to be incredibly strong and very versatile. Mediums and even heavy tanks at Tier 10 will easily bounce off your upper plate if they're not paying too much of attention. So before we break into the statistics of this tank, I do want to point out that this tank is in Super Test. It's not even in the normal test client. Now what's the difference? Super Test is when the tank is not even in the normal game yet. You're not going to be seeing this tank roll around in the battlefield yet. It's currently being tested by basically very, very well trusted people in the system. Once it's done with that, you might see it being tested in the actual game itself, but usually when it comes to vehicles like the Vickers CR, the T92E1, even the Object 84, they just enter the Super Test, and then once Wargaming thinks they're balanced, they just release them into the game. So what I can tell you is that the statistics that I'm showing you here are most likely going to be very close to the final statistics, as most of the Tier 9s Wargaming release into the game really don't get many changes in their overall Super Test. So let's take a look at its statistics, see what's good and see what is bad. Hit points, 2173. That's not a crazy amount, especially judging that that is with the vitality put on it. So it's only got about 2,000 base hit points, definitely one of the lowest hit points Tier 9 heavies in the game, so you'll have to be a little careful, but let's be honest, 2200 HP is still plenty. Other Tier 9 heavies like the E75 have around 24, 2300, so it'll still be plenty to weather the storm and deal with other opponents. You can see the turret flat is only about 203. Now it is angled, so as I said, it's decently thick. It'll be good at bouncing a lot of Tier 8s, a lot of Tier 9s, but when you get up to Tier 10, you're going to have to be incredibly worried. One thing that did really stand out to me when it comes to the effective armor is the sides of the hull, sitting at 120 millimeters base. Now it might not have any spaced armor on the sides, as we can very easily see here, but it is slightly angled, and what that means is this tank is going to be absolutely phenomenal at side scraping. 120 millimeters is really, really solid. That's like the same as German super heavies, and for it to be on a quite mobile Japanese heavy, that's going to be great, and you are going to bait a lot of shells trying to over-angle your side and seeing, well, if people fall for that trap. The upper plate's 127 millimeters thick, and as you can see just on flat ground, that upper plate is incredibly steep on the angle, so effective armor is going to be way, way better, probably upwards of 300 millimeters thick. You're not going to be able to penetrate it unless you are loading the highest of premium ammunition. Its rear armor as well is very strong at 100 millimeters thick, although I will say there is one weak spot I've noticed, which is the rear of the turret. You'll notice when we take a look at the back of the tank, the turret is is a big ol' flat box, and judging that it's 90 millimeters thick, that means if you are using vehicles like the T110E4 or the Object 268, which carry over 90 millimeters of high explosive pen, you will be able to penetrate this tank. So that is one thing to keep in mind. If you have 90 millimeters of pen with the HE, which a lot of tier 10 150 millimeters do, you will be able to cut through the rear of this tank's turret, but funny enough, not the actual hull. Now, enough about the armor profile, let's take a look at its damage per minute, because it's actually very strong. 2,715 for a tier 9 heavy, that's great. That's going to make this one of the highest damage per minute tier 9s in the game. Even if you're running calibrated shells, it's going to be sitting at around 2,500 DPM, which is great. You're easily going to be able to contest with tier 10 heavy tanks, and in most cases, like an IS-7 or an IS-4, even have more damage per minute than them. So that's going to be absolutely amazing for pumping out those shells, especially because your standard pen at 250 is great. Let's say an E100 or a mouse pull around the corner, you gotta load into your premium ammunition reserves. Well, your premium pen, which is high explosive anti-tank, is 340 millimeters base, which means that if you're running calibrated, you can get up to 374 millimeters, making this the highest penetration you will find on a heavy tank in the game. Vehicles like the IS-4 and the T110E5 up at tier 10 also carry 374, but nothing passes it, which means that at tier 9, you have the highest pen for a heavy you will find, easily buttering through any tier 10s you will come across. Armor is really not going to be a problem for this vehicle, and the damage is great as well. It's 400 damage per shot. I was a little worried when I was looking at the tier 7 and tier 8 stats that the 310 damage might carry on to the tier 9 as well, but that is definitely not the case. You got a really good rate of fire, only an 8.8 second reload, 400 damage, and ridiculous penetration. And by the way, the aiming time and dispersion aren't too bad. It's 0.344 dispersion with an aiming time of 4.45 seconds. And for some reason, Asen put on supercharged, so your aiming time's more around 4 seconds. The real question is, how is the on-movement dispersion? Because as many of you know, depending on how good or bad your on-movement dispersion is, it can absolutely make or break a vehicle. So if this tank is extremely accurate on the move, it'll be amazing. But if it's terrible on the move, then yeah, you're gonna have to be a little bit careful. Its dispersion and aiming time, even if you're not running supercharge, are not amazing. When we take a look at the gun depression, it sits at 10 degrees and 20 degrees of gun elevation, the same as the tier 7 and the tier 8. However, the tier 10, weirdly enough, the Type 71, sits at 7 degrees of gun depression, so you do get a bit of a downgrade when it comes to the tier 10, but hey, the tier 9 is going to be amazing for working any ridge lines, and I guess it'll be pretty similar for the tier 8 and tier 7 when you are grinding along the line. As well, mobility is pretty good. It's 40 kilometers per hour forward and 15 in reverse. The reverse speed is meh. You will definitely have to pre-plan where you are positioning the tank. It's not bad, it's the same reverse as an IS-7, but we're coming into the age nowadays where being a really strong heavy requires very good reverse speed. That's why the 60 TP is so strong, and the tier 9, like the 50 TP and the 50 TP prototype, are so influential as well, as that if you put it into a situation you need to get out of, you can very quickly reverse. So 15 is not bad, but you'll definitely have to pre-plan where you are driving it. Average speed, though, is not bad at all. It's got a power to weight ratio of 15.6 and an average speed of 31 kilometers per hour, so it should quite easily get up to 35 or 40 on any hard terrain when you're driving down just a slight hill. It'll be very good on its overall power to weight. Now, in the pictures, this tank may not look very large, but this is actually a monstrous tank in its size. It weighs in at 67 tons. So this is a very heavy vehicle, very far off to what you would think on the overall looks. It looks just kind of like an STB-1, but mind you, it is probably 20% longer and wider than an STB. When we take a look at the turret reverse, it is atrocious. 20 degrees a second is terrible. And when we add that on with the 31 degrees a second of hull traverse, this tank is looking very similar to a WZ-113, just brought down the tier 9. So you will have to be very careful when you position this tank that you're not going to get yourself yourself stuck in a spot where you could be flanked by Sheridans or any other very mobile tank that can get to your side, get a big ol' slap out, and get back in the cover, because that will definitely be the case for its very, very slow traverse speed. And yeah, that's about all there is for the statistics of the Type 68. From looking at the tank, it looks very strong, that is what I will say. I'd say just take away a bit of the heat pen. I don't know why any tier 9 needs that much heat penetration, especially when we take a look at the hull armor, the side armor. Its hull down capabilities are amazing, it's got a great top speed. The only thing I would say is take away a bit of its overall heat pen and give it a bit better traverse rate. But apart from that, the tank looks pretty well balanced in my opinion. I really like having good DPM, so this tank is going to be great to really get nice damage games out in tier 9. I mean, the only other tier 9 heavies that really have this type of DPM are the M103 and maybe the M5 yo with the 3 shell now. But even then, this DPM is really solid, and it will definitely make this a strong contender even in tier 10 battles. I'm excited for the Type 71 to come into the game. It's going to be a really fun line, and it seems right now like it is going to be one of the strongest lines in the game. We'll have to see how these tanks are when they are eventually released into the game, probably within the next 2 updates or so, but we will only be able to tell as Wargaming does in the future. So, if you like this type of content and you'd like to see more like it in the future, please consider smashing that subscribe button down below. But other than that, I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye-bye!